I sure do miss seeing you every day. And so this week was letter W, and we have been talking about the weather. So I wanted to make sure that I got the chance to read one of my favorite books to you. So I'm making a video so I can still read one of my favorite books to you. So I'm going to read you the story, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Now, the author who does what? Writes the words is Judy Barrett, and then the illustrator, and that's the person that draws the pictures, is Ron Barrett. So let's read our story. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning, pancake morning. Mom was squeezing oranges for juice. Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we could each eat, and Grandpa was doing the flipping. Seconds later, something flew through the air and headed towards the kitchen ceiling, and it landed right on Henry. After we realized that the flying object was only a pancake, we all laughed, even Grandpa. Breakfast continued quite uneventfully. All the other pancakes landed in the pan, and all were eaten, even the one that landed on Henry's head. That night, touched off by the pancake incident at breakfast, Grandpa told us the best tall-tale bedtime story he'd ever told. Across the ocean, over lots of huge bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts and 1 smaller ocean, there lay the tiny town of Chew and Swallow. In most ways, it was very much like any other tiny town. It had a main street lined with stores, houses with trees and gardens around them, a schoolhouse, and 300 people and some assorted cats and dogs. But there was no food store in the town of Chew and Swallow. They didn't need it. The sky supplied all the food they could want. The only thing that was really different about Chew and Swallow was the weather. It came 3 times a day, at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything that everyone ate came from the sky. Whatever the weather served was what we ate, but it never just rained. It never snowed snow, and it never just blew wind. It rained things like soup or juice. It snowed mashed potatoes and green peas. And sometimes the wind blew in a storm of hamburgers. The people could watch the weather report on television in the morning, and they would even hear a prediction on the next day's food. When the townspeople went outside, they carried their plates, cups, glasses, forks, spoons, knives, and napkins. That way, they could always be prepared for the weather. If there were any leftovers, and there usually were, the people took them home and put them in the refrigerator in case they got hungry between meals. The menu varied. By the time they woke up in the morning, breakfast was coming down. After a brief shower of orange juice, low clouds of sunny-side-up eggs moved in, followed by pieces of toast. Butter and jelly sprinkled down on the toast. And most of the time, it rained milk afterwards. For lunch one day, frankfurters already in their rolls blew in from the northwest at about a 5 mile per hour. There was mustard clouds nearby, and the wind shifted to the east, and it brought in baked beans. A drizzle of soda finished off the meal. Dinner one night consisted of lamb chops, becoming heavy at times with occasional ketchup. Periods of peas and baked potatoes were followed by a clearing with a wonderful jello in the setting to the west. The sanitation department of Chew and Swallow had a rather unusual job for a sanitation department. It had to remove all the food that fell on the houses, sidewalks, and lawns. The workers cleaned up after every meal and fed all the dogs and cats. Then they emptied some of it into the surrounding oceans for the fish, turtles, and whales to eat. The rest of the food was put back into the earth so that the soil would be richer for people's flower gardens. Nobody went hungry. Life for the townspeople was delicious until the weather took a turn for the worse. Spaghetti ties up the town is on the cover of the news. One day there was nothing but gorgonzola cheese all day long. The next day there was only broccoli, all overcooked. The next day there were only Brussels sprouts, peanut butter with mayonnaise. Another day there was a pea soup fog. No one could see where they were going, and they could barely find the rest of their meal that got stuck in the fog. The food was getting larger and larger, and so were the portions. People were getting frightened. Violent storms blew up frequently. Strange things began happening. One Tuesday, there was a hurricane of bread and rolls, all day long and all night. There were soft rolls, hard rolls, some with seeds, some without seeds. There was white bread and rye bread and whole wheat toast. Most of it was larger than they had ever seen before. It was a terrible day. Everyone had to stay indoors. Roofs were damaged and the sanitation department got behind. The mess took workers 4 days to clean up. The sea was full of floating rolls. To help out, the people piled up as much bread as they could in their backyards. The birds pecked at it a bit, but it just stayed there and got staler and staler. Then there was the pancake storm. One morning, a downpour of maple syrup nearly flooded the town, and huge pancakes covered the school. No one could get it off because of its weight, so they had to close the school. Lunch brought 15-inch drifts of cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. Everyone ate themselves sick and ended the day with a stomachache. There were awful salt and pepper winds accompanied by the worst tomato tornado anyone had ever seen. People were sneezing themselves silly and running to avoid the tomatoes. The town was a mess. The seeds and the pulp were everywhere. The sanitation department gave up. This job was just too big. Everyone feared for their lives. They couldn't go outside most of the time. Many of the houses were damaged by giant meatballs. Stores were boarded up and there was no more school. Look at those donuts. They're huge. So a decision was made to abandon the town of Chew and Swallow. It was a matter of survival. The people glued together giant pieces of stale bread, sandwich style, with peanut butter. They took the absolute necessities with them and set sail on food rafts for a new land. After being afloat for a week, they finally reached a small coastal town which welcomed them. The bread had held up surprisingly well enough that they built temporary houses for themselves out of it. The children began school again and the adults tried to find themselves a new place in this land. The biggest challenge they had to make was getting used to buying food at the supermarket. They found it odd that food was kept on shelves and packaged in boxes, cans, and bottles. Meat had to be cooked and was kept in large refrigerators. Nothing came down from the sky except rain and snow. The clouds overhead never made fried eggs, and no one ever got hit by a hamburger again. And nobody dared go back to Chew and Swallow to find out what happened. They were too afraid. Henry and I were awake until the very end of Grandpa's story. I remember his goodnight kiss. The next morning we woke up to see snow had fallen outside our window. We ran downstairs and ate our breakfast a little faster than usual so we could go sledding with Grandpa. It's funny, but even as we were sledding down the hill, we thought we saw a giant pat of butter on the top, and we could almost smell the mashed potatoes. The end. Now, boys and girls, this story is pretend. We know that really food doesn't fall out of the sky, does it? And we know that it's not real because we have to go to a grocery store to buy our food and we cook it. So I have a special art thing that I would like you to do today or tomorrow. I want you to draw a picture of what you would like to see fall from the sky. Like one of my favorite foods is ice cream. I would love to see ice cream just fall out of the sky so I could go stand outside with my mouth open and ice cream could just fall right in. So if you draw me a picture of what you would like the weather to make for you, I would love for you to have Mommy and Daddy take a picture of whatever you draw and send it to me so I can see it. And maybe I'll draw a special picture and I'll send it to your moms and dads so you can see what I would like to have fall from the sky. I want you to know that every day I think about you and I miss you. So I'm going to send you a big hug to all my friends out there. I will read you another story again soon. All right? Goodbye, everybody.